Hi everyone, welcome back to Oritas Insights. I am Carly Sills and I am the AVP here at Oritas, and I am joined here today by
Mani Ramaswamy. Good morning everyone. Hopefully we have an impactful session for you today.
Thank you for joining us again. We are bringing you hot off the press information about how we're dealing with SAP customers about finance excellence. But before we even talk about solutions, I really want to break down what is best practice when we talk about procure-to-pay end-to-end. Can you walk some of our listeners into what is best practice when it comes to invoice-to-pay?
Okay. So I'll take the invoice to pay first, Carly, and I can certainly circle back to procure to pay because they're so intrinsically connected. So broadly, procurement's divided into two parts: direct and indirect. Direct's everything that you're buying to produce goods, raw material that goes towards your finished goods. So anything towards that activity is considered direct. Everything else, consumables that your enterprise uses to operate the company, is indirect. Now, depending on the size of your enterprise, you could be executing both indirect and direct in ERP. You could be, in some cases, doing your indirect procurement in Ariba, right? So the third leg in this stool is finance, right? So we talked about procurement and where procurement occurs. Best practice is you always want to reconcile the invoice where the procurement occurred, where the products were bought from. But consider finance. Finance is always ERP based, right? So as all of this is happening, they want, direct or indirect, they want one process, one platform from where they can monitor, track, intervene, and manage the AP process, right? So if you're a very direct heavy customer, I would say pick a platform and I go back to the core tenet, which is reconcile the invoice where the demand occurred. And given that the high amount of direct happen in ERP and those are high volumes, the best bang for your buck is to pick a solution that's built into ERP in terms of invoice management.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said, assessing solutions, looking for that. Obviously, we're specifically talking about SAP customers. You mentioned finance wants to be inside ERP. And what is the significance around selecting something that's an add-on to SAP? So something like SAP Invoice Management by OpenText, along with Capture Core. Can you walk everyone through why have a lot of our customers made the decision to go the solution extension route? And what are some of the success criteria? As you know, we really focus our implementations on business outcome, which is where a lot of our built-in accelerators come in through an implementation. So what are you seeing as a lot of the benefits from our customers selecting a Solex as their end state?
Yeah, great question. So, most of your finance, your ERP functions, right? So when you talk about finance, all of your business rules are in finance, right? Ultimately, the invoice needs to get posted in ERP. So it needs to pass all of the compliance rules, all of the validations in ERP. So a tool, selecting an add-on, like a solution extension, like OpenText that you called it, basically OpenText wraps itself around core ERP functions. So think of it as a module that sits between the cusp of materials management, where procurement happens, and finance. And that means it knows all of your business rules, right? It can also accelerate the workflow, the compliance and the workflow process. Thereby, the outcome is a very, very highly automated process. Yes, there are some solutions that live outside ERP. I'm trying to contrast, solutions that live outside ERP versus an add-on. They can deliver some level of automation too. They can streamline. But the best automation you can get is being inside of ERP.
Interesting. And speaking of automation, speaking of the evolution of the product, when you look at invoice management and Capture Core, can you speak to a little bit of the Gen AI elements that have just been released and how our customers are benefiting from that?
Yeah, huge improvement in the solution, I think. So traditionally, so the solution has comprised of, I'd say, two key elements, right? The invoice management aspect, which is what manages the life cycle of the invoice. But upfront, you need a good machine reading engine, and that's been this what we call Capture Core, and that's always been great. We've delivered impressive automation for a lot of customers, even with that.
And from a global standpoint.
And from a global standpoint, right? But with the advent of AI, right, it's taken a huge quantum leap, I would say. So there's very believable Gen AI embedded within the core capture aspect, so which means the efficacy of OCR has increased by leaps and bounds. And then, and obviously that's the beginning of the process, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if, the quality of the initial read of the invoice determines how automated your downstream outcomes are going to be. So that's a big plus. But what's also fantastic to see is the injection of agentic AI capabilities within the Vim platform, which can lead to a far superior user experience. In fact, no screen user experience. A lot of that could be driven by an agentic approach, which can then lead to, in the future, autonomous agents, right? So agents actually acting on the behalf of humans with the human in the loop. It's going to be with guardrails, with rules, but I think we are at the cusp of a very exciting future.
You heard that here, folks. Additionally, I know a lot of people that may be looking forward to attending SAP Connect. Yes, there are folks that are attending really heavy on the AP side, but what about when we look at procure-to-pay end-to-end?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, even from an architecture standpoint, when you describe a decentralized platform, where does Ariba come in, and where does something like an invoice management solution fit?
Sure.
How are they integrated?
Sure. Again, I'm going to do I'm going to pick the last question first, right? Because we're talking invoicing. It's and I said if you're very direct centric, pick something that's embedded in ERP. But you could also be a customer that's very heavily indirect, right? Or you could have indirect, but there's still a lot of indirect. Large companies tend to have a lot of indirect volumes, right? Because the use case for Ariba is maverick buying, right? And you want all of that to be under a contract, right? Under what Ariba calls guided buying. And what that means is now that you have this body of buyers in the organization that are going to live in Ariba, and they don't know anything about ERP. So in those cases, right, ultimately that invoice needs to be reconciled, needs to be approved within Ariba. Same thing, you still want a solution that works for finance, right? But I'm going to break my answer into two parts. If you are a very indirect centric customer, Ariba invoicing is a great choice. Because it delivers the same streamlining, same automation, and it allows you to stay close to the Ariba solution from an end-to-end value chain perspective, right? But if you're a large customer with sufficient indirect and direct volumes, I would argue you probably need a hybrid solution, something that is embedded within ERP, so it delivers kind of the efficiencies for finance, but at the same time integrates with the Ariba invoicing concept, right? And allows indirect invoices to be reconciled within Ariba.
Understood. No, and that's great. And I think a lot of our clients as well are looking to, when they make a selection to a solution, we always talk about a point solution versus a robust solution. You want a solution that's going to grow and evolve with you throughout your roadmap. So when they make some of these decisions, if you could explain, how are we expanding the use cases for some of these solutions? So when we think of invoice management, we have customers, when you look at Finance Excellence as a whole, if you could take a little bit of a deeper dive to expand upon how we're leveraging invoice management for sales order management, of course, invoice-to-pay, ESG reporting for carbon footprint, and vendor statement reconciliation.
Gosh, the list is growing, right?
It's growing.
It's growing, yeah. So some of the things that you've talked about have, most of the things you've talked about have been built on this platform. So it's actually now more payback for the customer, in terms of their invoice management investment. So a couple of key use cases beyond invoice to pay, right? The foremost is sales order management, right? So customer purchase
Beyond
orders.
invoicing.
Beyond invoicing. So customer purchase orders coming in. When you don't have when you have PDF, email-based purchase orders, this is a fantastic solution. It's this, all the key underpinnings that we talked about that delivers automation for AP does a brilliant job for sales orders. In fact, I would argue even more. The solution is brilliant there. It can deal with a lot of complexity. And again, being ERP embedded means it knows your sales conditions, your order management conditions. It knows your pricing. It knows your ATP checks, right? So it's able to orchestrate an omni-channel order intake process and a highly automated process. Our customers love it, who have implemented it. They've seen a dramatic improvement in productivity release for these customer service reps.
And I would argue that there's customers out there that know of that use case, right? So, but I would say what's our differentiator as Oritas are these built-on packages that we've been able to deploy with our clients. And I think it is very significant in the market space, especially what we're seeing now. So if we were to focus on ESG reporting, vendor statement reconciliation, cash remittance, and prepaid, right? How have we extended the platform to capitalize on that additional value?
Great. I mean, our finance excellence is growing, everything that you mentioned. So the tool now delivers out-of-the-box answers for Scope 1 and Scope 2 ESG reporting. Fantastic. A lot of customers are realizing value out of that. It's also addressing like you said, vendor statement reconciliation. The number 2 area after invoice processing for AP where they spend time is in vendor statement reconciliation. We now have a completely automated tool built on the same platform for that, right? And last but not least, like you said, cash application, as well as prepaid amortizations are all fantastic use cases to unlock, delivering further value. For the same solution.
Perfect. Well, I hope you got a little bit of an insight for finance excellence with Oritas. We will be in attendance, Mani and myself, at SAP Connect this coming October. Oritas is a sponsor this year, so please feel free to find us at our booth, and we look forward to having some excellent conversations with you.
Thank you. Hope to see you there.